Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below, even if it's just to say hi, because it helps our algorithm and gets us seen. Also, be sure to share this video with a friend who's a playwright, producer, director, actor, all of the above. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a playwright, producer, actor, screenwriter, Walt Disney Company Fellowship winner, and licensed marriage and family therapist. He's written over 30 short plays, some of which have been produced in New York City and Hollywood. His book of short plays, Hearing Voices, has received rave reviews, and he is currently working on another collection due to be released in 2023 called Hearing More Voices. His full-length plays include Homecoming and NYC Nativity. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul Surace.
Wow. That was quite effective and very impressive that you had all that memorized.
Yeah, I've only, I'm sure it did.
I don't see any cue cards, so that was awfully good.
I'm sure, they can see my eye line. There's so many questions I want to ask it. But I think the first one that we'll start with, is how did you start writing plays? What's your background in playwriting? How did you start? Do you have did you study it?
Well, yes and no. I started when I was a teenager in my church, actually. I back in Long Island, New York, the youth leader actually asked me if I would write a Christmas play. And I said, absolutely, I would. I wound up writing it, producing it, and starring in it. And actually, it went over quite well with the congregation. A lot of laughs, a lot of smiles, and I didn't offend anybody, so I was pleased, and I was hooked as well.
Sure. Well, it's always a bonus when you don't offend anybody. So on that note, I have a question then, because you mentioned things that to me are kind of taboo in playwriting, and that's writing, acting, directing. So I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Would you do you still do that, and would you still do that? I'm just curious if and have you learned from that moment on to now?
Well, it's a great question, and yeah, that was a church production, and it was good for what it was, and but as I've evolved over the years. I actually have, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've put together 3 or 4 night of one-act plays that I've written, and I always use. I have a go-to director named Conrad Dunn, who's a bit of a movie star, a film actor, TV actor, a great director, and I've used him consistently, and thankfully so. I've had no real desire to direct the things I've written. But I do put myself usually into one of the 5 plays that I'll put up in a night. That's reasonable, because I actually like to sit in on the rehearsals of the other 4 plays, and I'm always trimming stuff away or adding stuff depending on the actors, which makes it very organic and fun for me as a writer.
So expand on that, unpack that whole thing, and how that works. What when you sit in, well. Let me ask you 2 questions.
Yeah.
How does that work when you sit in? What do you learn from that? And then how does it affect your play that you're working on? Yeah. And then at the same time, as the playwright who's acting, how is it being directed in your own work when you know kind of what do you push back? Do you find... And that's a lot, so I can repeat those by any means. So
let me start with the first one. So what I discover, first of all, when I sit in on these rehearsals with Conrad and the actors, it's a really wonderful experience for me as a writer as I hear my words come to life even before they go on stage. And some actors are really good with dialogue, and sometimes I'll add dialogue for them, and some actors not as good, and sometimes I'll edit and take some things away without being rude. I try to do that more subtly. But also along the way, you come up with better lines, and sometimes Conrad will throw me a gem here and there that he'll throw out a line of dialogue, and I always say, Conrad, that was wonderful. It's going into the script. I'm really sorry I can't give you credit for it, though, buddy.
So, all right. So I know that I threw another question in there prior, and I apologize if we're not finished with that answer. But now you said something that that I'm curious about, and that is so you base your rewrites on the actor that's doing the performance. But what happens? So I guess the reason why I'm kind of curious about this is that maybe that actor's weak, and so you've edited your play down for somebody who is maybe weaker, but if you had a stronger performer, so how, do you keep that draft and you say, I liked it better, or do you just go, hey, it's what it is, and, move forward from there?
Well, what I've found, James, is that I tend to overwrite my plays anyway. I tend to overwrite. Anybody will tell you that's read any of my early drafts. So the wonderful part about these rehearsals is I really get to take a pencil and go through and take out a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there. I cut to the chase quicker, and especially in these short plays. So it's not all about the actors. Sometimes when I hear how long it is with these actors, sometimes I say, oh my God, when I was writing it in my head, it didn't seem that long. But wow, as I'm listening to it, it's too long. So I mostly, again, I'll reward a good actor and give them more dialogue, or, if I think of funnier lines, I throw them in, of course. But I'm mostly, I don't know that there's so many weak actors that I've cast that I'm taking lines away from them as much as I'm taking lines away from an overwritten script. And that's good for me as a writer.
Do you recognize prior when it's too long? Or is it just like, because again, we'll call it workshopping.
Yeah.
So I guess, it's just, if that's part of the process, so.
So, usually what I do is I'll run it by and read it out loud. I'll read it to my wife first, and she's usually the first set of ears that will listen to my work. And usually, and she's a pretty good judge of whether, I've written too much, and she's certainly not shy about telling me, if something seems overwritten to her. But I also can tell as I'm reading it. Sometimes I'm reading my work, and as I'm going through it, I'm saying, "Oh, this is way too long. I've got to go out to my balcony and sit down there and get to it." But I do as best I can. In the end, they're still kind of overwritten, and my job and my journey is always to try to carve it up so that it's as short and concise as it can be.
Well, it's humbling, because I know there's a lot of, let's call them egotistical playwrights who, kind of refuse to trim down or cut them. But you will still edit prior, so you still take a pass or two beforehand.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a process? Is it a consistent routine of how you approach writing? Do you sit down like, I've got the idea? Do you make a first pass? Do you write linearly? Do you stop and say, okay, that's enough for today, I just wanted to get 3 pages? What's the Paul Surace process? And then we're going to write a book called the Paul Surace process.
I don't think anyone will read that one.
No.
But what I'll tell you is this, oftentimes I'll get inspired by a line of dialogue that just jumps out at me, or an event that's moved me or touched me in some ways. Writers write what they know. I mean, not too long ago, a year or so ago, my wife went for a cornea transplant, and She was worried and anxious before going. And I remember like a week or so before she went for the surgery, we sat across from each other at the table, and we about as far away as you and I are here, maybe even closer. And she said to me that, she hadn't put her contacts in, but I was a blur. She couldn't even make out my face. And I remember how stunned I was that you could be so close to a person and not be able to see that person. But that's what she was dealing with. Again, she was going to put contacts in and it was going to get better. But still, she had already failed the DMV driving test a couple of times, and she was worried that she was going to fail it and keep failing it. And that was part of her anxiety and part of why she knew that she needed to get the surgery. Sure. And I turned that into a play called Blind Sight, which turned into, a bit of a romantic comedy, because I wanted to take that situation and have some fun with it, but also get poignant with it as well, because the irony there is that those eyes of hers that are not so good to see things, but she was able to see that she and I were a good match and that we could make it, while a lot of her friends were saying maybe not.
Oh, that's sweet.
And so
not the friend part of me,
right.
So you said that it turned into a romantic comedy, or not romantic comedy, it was kind of a romantic piece.
Yeah.
So,
well, like a love piece, a poignant piece.
Sure.
Poignant comedy.
So did you go in with that intention, or that's just how it...
Yeah. Oftentimes I just write with one idea only. I just write with a starting point, and then I let the characters kind of get in the car and drive me. In fact, that's the title of my book, Hearing Voices. I just try to get alone with those characters, sit down with them, spend time with them, and let them talk to me. And then they tell me where to go, a lot of times. Not all the time, but a lot of times.
So you don't necessarily sit down with an intention, or if you do sit down with an intention, do you in turn then just say, not fight it? Do you not fight it and just say, take me, let your car, get in the car and drive. At least your characters, I mean.
Well, you know what? So that's definitely part of the process is letting these characters take me where they want to go. And then as I write and rewrite, because we all know writing is rewriting. So as the drafts keep coming, I very well may redirect these guys where the actors took me. Maybe I want to tweak it, or maybe I want to add a twist to it that I hadn't seen in the original. Mostly I try to spill out that first draft really quickly, just kind of, excuse my mouth, but vomit it out, and go as far as I can with that first draft. But really, my scripts get so much better as I continue to rewrite them. And it's in the rewriting that I find different, more interesting tweaks and twists and turns that weren't necessarily in the initial draft.
Sure. How do you recognize where those twists and turns come, and how do you implement them? How do you recognize it, and then how do you implement them, or can you?
Yeah, well, they're very implementable because first of all, I think interesting writing needs twists and needs turns and needs unexpected turns. Sure. Right? Otherwise, it just kind of, it's blasé. It's what everybody expected.
Right.
And so it's. I guess as I just continue to read the work that I've already done, that first draft is the starting point. But there's the clay, and for me, it's not so hard to get in there and to maneuver, and take them in a different direction, just with, just a different turn will evoke a whole lot of dialogue that goes in that different direction. So no, it's not very hard, James, to to put in the twists and the turns afterwards, and they just come to me as I go along.
But do you recognize it where it's lacking? And then, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I can articulate this. I'm like, I guess you just, if it's your piece, you know where it needs to happen, or I mean, you're not planning it, right? It's just,
yeah. I mean, yeah. I just see it. I just see it. I just see. Wow, this would be so much more interesting if I went in this direction.
Do you know what that direction is at that moment, or it's just like, I know it'd be more interesting if something else happened here, and I need to figure out what it is. I'm fascinated by this, and I'm trying to figure out if you can be taught, or if it's just something you recognize on your own. I don't know.
Well, it's a good question, and perhaps it can be taught. I don't know that anybody taught me how to look for ways to make a twist or a turn. For example, one of the most recent plays that I wrote, about a radio DJ that gets a caller, he calls in and he wants to commit suicide on air. It's called First Time Caller. So he's a mysterious guy, and he says, I want to pump up your ratings. So just let me die on air. And in fact, he'd taken the pills before he called in. And then he just wants to let the DJ let him die on air, and I'll pump up your ratings and give you a better time slot. By the way, that was based on a real true story that happened in the 50s. Wow. In New York City, where a guy did just that. And the radio DJ, talked to him long enough where eventually he was saved. The cops figured out where he was. I don't know if they traced the call. I'm not quite sure of the original story. My story, there's no tracing of the... No, I think the original story, the wife actually heard him on the air because he was divorced, and the wife notified the police to come save him, and that's what happened. And that's what happens in my story. But to me, the big twist that I threw into the mix that came to me was, wouldn't it be so interesting if these two guys knew each other? And if back in middle school or high school they were friends, that had gone separate ways, and this other one guy got popular and ghosted him, and he was a bit of a nerd and got bullied, and they went their separate ways. And so the big twist that I decided to put into the script is that the reveal is that, hey, at one point in time he says, you know me, we were friends back in high school. And that's the point in the script where the DJ, where the talk show host, where it really hits him, how his life has gone this certain way, and he's been this angry, iconoclastic Howard Stern type of a talk show host. But that was the piece that kind of melted him and really turned it around in my script and with this character. And so how did I think of that? I don't know. I just thought, well, wouldn't it be much more interesting if this caller, actually knew him, not just from the air.
Sure. I mean, don't you think I've gotten into this a little bit in past episodes, but don't you think it's kind of, one, easier, and two, better that you write characters that are familiar with each other than writing plays with complete strangers?
Oh, that's an interesting question, James. That's interesting. It never really occurred to me, that people know each other, and that makes for a more interesting play. For me, what makes for a more interesting play is that you bring people together that really have opposing views, of life and how to do life. And they're inextricably bound through the situation, and they can't get away from each other, So I don't necessarily know that they makes for a better play if they know each other versus don't know, as much as, they just have conflict built into them on how they do life, how they do the world.
How do you approach conflict in your plays?
Well, how do I approach it? Well, I want it.
You should have it.
I need it, and it's boring if I don't have it. But what do you mean by that question?
I mean, do you go in with that intention when you sit down and write? Would you already know what the conflict is going to be, or is that going back to the characters and saying, like, you tell me what's going on, you tell me what the conflict is here, intent on figuring out what it is, or
Yeah. Well, I guess I try to bring situations where the characters, are set up for conflict. Another short play I've written is Toda la Noche, which is Spanish for all through the night, and it was based upon. Again, a little autobiographical there, but my Latina wife wanted to hold me all through the night, and of course, that's smothering, and I wasn't interested. So I would always be fighting her off, not wanting to be held, not wanting to be smothered. I need space. But that phrase, Toda la Noche, is just so funny to me. And that was what a script I wanted to write. And therein lied the conflict was my Latina wife, wanted to hold me through the night and be affectionate like that. And I'm not too interested. So that's built-in conflict.
You're going to be in so much trouble when she listens to this episode. I want to go back because we started. There's a couple of questions we need to go back to, and we didn't really quite finish hitting on all those points. So you wrote a play when you were younger, teenager, or
17, high school.
Okay, and so do you have formal training? How did you learn how to write plays?
No, that's a gift. I would tell you it's a gift. I remember, James, I was knocked out when I read Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. And I remember reading that play in high school. And I remember weeping in bed. I was reading it in bed. And I think I literally wept, at the ending of that play, sad ending. For quite some time. And there's something when I can read a play and I read dialogue and I read plays a lot better than I read screenplays, which are more about plot and action. I'm sure there are some screenplays where it's much more about the character. Those are smaller budget films, of course, but I always was able to read plays and kind of imagine them really well in my mind, whether the funny or the sadness. And I just sensed that I could do it. And so, when I got that invitation to write the Christmas play, it was like, yeah, I think I can do it. And I knocked it out in a day or two and then had some fun producing it. So, it's not that I've never taken a writing class since then. I have. But I would want to tell you, James, that I don't think I'm a real schooled writer per se. But I know what I can write. I know what I like to write, and especially the short plays, they come really, really easily to me, as opposed to the full length. Even though I have a couple of full length in mind, and now that I'm retired, I may put more time into it.
Sure.
And go after them.
So, what are there bad habits that you realized that you had to break yourself out of, having no formal training? Or
yeah, something comes to mind when you ask that question. Something comes immediately to mind.
Okay.
The word subtext, in other words, James, you probably could define that better than I could. But
my guess is that you did a lot of telling and not showing.
Correct. I think words come easily to me.
Sure.
And like most writers, words come easily for the most part, and the hard part is not saying it. You know, one of my writer friends from way long ago, who actually then became a famous sitcom, producer and writer, Matt Williams. But many years ago, I worked on a soap opera with him back in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and he wound up producing The Cosby Show, and then went on to Roseanne Barr's show, and then he went on to the Tool Time guy. I forgot what his name.
Yeah, Tim Allen.
Yeah, so Matt Williams had a string of very successful sitcoms for a while. But I worked with him. He was on our soap opera called Another Life in Virginia Beach, Virginia. For 2 years, I was the AD on the show. Mm-hmm. And he was writing his plays back then, his short plays, that eventually got him a job with Cosby. And what he told me was, know what you want to say and then don't say it. Now, that's easier said than done. Know what you want to say and then don't say it. It's like, well, I think my journey as a writer is to try to do that, try to do more of that, because I think I mostly say it.
Is that when you realize is that when you realize you weren't using subtext, or were you always, or had you already learned that, but that was just like, oh my gosh, that's even better. Now I really know how to, Well, because it's a great piece of advice.
It is a great piece of advice, but I don't know that I've been able to kind of utilize it as much as I would like to. I don't know if you picked up my book, Hearing Voices, or this next book that's coming out in the next couple of months, Hearing More Voices. You read these short plays. I don't know that I'm brilliant at subtext and not saying things, but I do know that I do know what my gifts are. I know what I'm strong at as a writer. I'm pretty strong at getting real characters in conflict with one another, and I'm pretty damn good at poignant comedy. That's where I really excel. Where I'm a make them laugh, make them cry kind of guy. I remind myself a little bit, God bless, I mean, I'm no Neil Simon, of course, obviously. But Neil Simon, I was always struck with his ability toward the end of his days as a writer of poignant comedy, where he really would make you laugh and make you cry all the time.
So going back, because we strayed away from it a little bit, and that is what you learned from as the playwright in the play being directed. Now, were you open to those things? Were you resistant and saying, look, I wrote this, you don't know it, or were you like open to say, oh my gosh, I didn't even pick that up? How did that?
So James, it's a really good question. And actually it's quite, it's observant of you that I might have a hard time being directed in my own pieces.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think it's per playwright. So
here's the thing. So you're spot on in the sense that I guess I know what I wrote and I know how I wanted to say it and perform it. Absolutely. So I have to trust somebody enough to kind of be directed by them, sure. And then I have to be okay that director is going to let me have some input too.
Sure.
And Conrad Dunn has been the man when it comes to that, where there's a lot of good give and take that he allows me to do with him. So I've been lucky. I've done 5 of my own pieces, and Conrad, I think, has directed 4 of the 5. So that's been helpful, and trust that we have that trust that's built in there.
Did you find any issues when you were directed by somebody else that wasn't Conrad, that it was like, oh God, what if I only get back to Conrad because you don't know?
So it was only one other person that directed me, and he had a ton of experience as a director, this young man, and he's also a writer as well. I won't name any names, but he was good enough. It wasn't a tremendous experience with him, but it wasn't a horrible experience either.
Well, I'm sure it was just different than...
Yeah. Yeah. But he was okay. I mean, I could throw suggestions at him as well, and he'd be okay with it. So, I mean, I think any director, you tell me, James, but I think any director worth his salt is going to want to hear from the actor,
Sure,
as to what their thoughts are.
I think there has to be questions that are asked, from a director to the actors, all in pretty much 100% of all cases, at least in the beginning rehearsal process. I would say.
Yes.
So normally, when I do an intro, there's certain things that I don't include that I find that are unnecessary. Now, the one thing that I did include is in yours, and I find that there's a reason behind it. So that you are a licensed marriage and family counselor.
Yes.
So, and of course, we've got hearing voices and hearing more voices. So how much of the material that you've written is drawn upon your years as a counselor? And are they direct? Do you tweak them? Are they, they private stories? I'm just imagining that you have gotten a lot of material based on this.
Yes and no. First of all, I was very hesitant, especially in this first book that came out like 5 years ago. So I've been working with Kaiser Permanente for about 15 years now, and I'm only just now, at the end of December, I'll be retired from them, from Kaiser. And it's been a great run, and I've learned a ton of stuff being a counselor, working under Kaiser Permanente.
Sure.
I have only good things to say about them. But I was certainly hesitant to want to write any pieces with a therapist, especially serious pieces. There was one piece I wrote called "The Breakup" that I produced a couple of years back, where I played the role of a therapist, and I was breaking up with a couple that didn't want to leave me, but I thought it was time for them to go. And so, in essence, it was a very comical scene. I thought it was a funny scene. But it does bring up the ethical question, can a therapist fire a patient? And I would say, well, mostly no, you don't. You work with patients. But of course, if you feel like you're not doing them much good and you think that they could do better with another set of eyes, with a fresh take, you certainly can, I don't know if the right word is to fire a patient, as much as you would want to encourage them to, try somebody else, because I think we've gone as far as we could go, which was the gist of that scene, by the way, is I think we've gone as far as we can go. We've made some good progress. I think it's time. You should work with somebody else now, but they didn't want to go.
There was somebody I know that actually was released, to put it gently, was basically like, look, I can't help you anymore. There's nothing I can do to help you.
Yeah. And I think ethically that's the right thing to do. Ethically is like, you don't want to take somebody's money, or you don't want them to pay a copay for Kaiser or anybody, or if I'm in private practice, I don't want to take your money if I don't feel I'm helping you much, or I feel like I've done as much as I can. I think it's very fair and very ethical to try to encourage them to get a fresh look.
What are the differences from your perspective, having written and been produced in New York and then written and produced in LA? Do you find one is more accessible? Do you find one is more I don't know if successful is the right word, but yeah, what do you find the differences are between those two cities as far as being a playwright?
Well, so I've had like I said, I produced NYC Nativity. I had produced it. I called it it was a different title back then.
What was it back then?
Merry Christmas, Miss Molly.
Yes.
And Molly's a runaway teenager, pregnant in New York City, about to have a baby, and she meets an out-of-work plumber named Joseph.
Huh.
And
Sounds
then
familiar.
three men of the street, we'll call them, happen upon them just as she's having the baby. So it's a reenactment, in a sense, of the nativity story.
Sure.
But it's done, I think, respectfully and with a lot of poignancy, especially the three, I don't know if we'll call them homeless men. I don't know what the right word is. Sure. But one's an Irishman, one's an African-American that used to be a maitre d' at a famous restaurant, and one's a fiery Puerto Rican. And so it's a very funny play, and I came very close to producing it here in Los Angeles a couple of years ago. But, as I got it cast, and I put a director to it, but it was a bad match of director and the actor, so it never quite materialized, even though I had rented the theater and everything. It was all set to go, about 2 weeks away.
So let's talk about that. What is it that, going through that process, being so close, especially for your own piece, what made you pull the trigger and say, we're done, this isn't going to happen?
Wow. That was one of my most discouraging and disappointing moments, as a producer playwright, because I had really assembled a great cast. And I think the cast was so good and had a lot of very experienced actors in the cast. And the director was relatively young and not as experienced. And he only had 4 weeks to get it off the ground, and he wanted to spend the first week or two doing like acting exercises that the other actors were rebelling. Within 2 weeks they rebelled. Maybe I gave them 6 weeks to get it up and off the ground. And anyway, the actors started to mutiny within 2 to 3 weeks. And sadly, what I learned as a producer, the director asked me to stay away, that he wanted to kind of just play. His term was, I want to go put them in a sandbox and play with them for a little while. So could you please just stay away and let me do that? And I trusted him because I thought he had it in control. But apparently 2 weeks later, when I wasn't around, the actors even thought that I was remiss in my producing duties, that I wasn't around checking in. And meanwhile, I was hearing from him things were going okay. So it wasn't until, 1 or 2 actors actually mutinied the show. Wow. And I tried to save it in the end. I tried to recast. But you know what?
So they left. They bailed.
Yeah, I had 1 or 2 actors that bailed, and I needed to. And one of them was like a lead, and I tried to replace them, and it was. But even with the ones that stayed, they really didn't trust the director, and so I was looking for a new director at the same time I was looking for an actor, and even though I had spent the money, I had spent the money and paid in full for the theater in NoHo, I lost it all. I just had to pull the plug.
What made you decide? Why give this particular director the job?
Okay, because he did a great job with one of my short plays.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
6 months earlier, he did a great job with one of my short plays called Grave Knowledge, and so he hit a home run with that, and he talked a good talk. I handed him this full-length script, and he talked a good talk. So I really thought he had total control and command and confidence, and it turned out that it didn't show up, especially with these seasoned actors, that taught acting. 1 or 2 of them taught acting.
So do you think that there's a fine line, or a huge difference between directing a short and directing a short play is one thing, especially if it's just one scene, opposed to a full length that might be multiple scenes, different locations. different actors, et cetera, and
Yeah, absolutely. That first scene that he did really well with, it was a 20-page scene as opposed to a 80-page full-length play. And again, like I said, maybe I got it to him a little late. 6 weeks isn't a lot of time to make it happen. But if he had hit the ground running with these guys, I think he could have made it happen easily in 6 weeks. But yeah, it was not to be. But it was a good experience for me. I realized that I will never be away from my production. It's like I'll be there in the rehearsals. That was where I screwed up, is that I wasn't there in the first 2 weeks when he was rehearsing.
Okay, I want to touch on that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'll just do it now because the question I was going to ask just floated away like they usually do. At least once an episode, it never fails. I'll lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I lost that one too.
Now, James, I've observed that sometimes you'll ask me a question, and I'll start to answer it, and then I'll go off on a tangent.
Tangents are
and I
fine.
won't necessarily get back to answering your question.
It's okay. That's why we don't edit. So, what have you learned? What have you learned from that instance when you're, or what did you learn, and what will you never do again in that regard? In regards to directing, how will you approach it in the future? Do you vet them now, or?
Yeah, much more so. Like I said, I thought because you did a great job with the short play,
sure,
that you could handle the longer play, especially because he talked a good talk. I got to hand it to him. But now I would look more for credits and maybe look what I learned to do after that is I stayed with the director that I've worked with all these years now has been Conrad Dunn. And, I mostly just tried to stay with him for the most part, and he's directed a lot of these short plays over the years for me.
Sure. Okay, so where I was going with that was you said that you would never not be part of the rehearsal process. So
Yes.
On that note, then what happens when your pieces are licensed and you're not in that town?
Oh, I see. Oh, James, that's an easy one. James, let it go.
Can't you just say? Isn't that one of the same? Why if I can't just let it go? You just said that. No, I'm never gonna not be in the room.
No, if it's here in Los Angeles, I got to be a part. No,
enough.
If I'm producing it, I got to be a part of it.
Got it.
Somebody else producing it, God bless you. By the way, sometimes I've had that happen a few times where I gave the play away to some director or producer friends, and you showed up and you were disappointed with what happened. But yeah, what can you do? God bless. Hey, you want to work with my plays? God bless you. Work with my plays. That's fine.
So on that note, because when I was doing some of the research, not that, and we have a history as it is, so it's I mean but I still like to do a little research so I can come up with the bios and stuff like that.
Okay.
So the one thing I noticed that you're not on New Play Exchange, which is a platform where a lot of you can get your work out, which is fine. You don't need to be there. There's plenty of playwrights out there that aren't, even if they do know about it.
Yeah.
So my question to you is how have you gotten licensing of any of your pieces from Hearing Voices?
No, I have not. I've got some interest in people that want to make short films out of one or two of them. Yeah, which is nice. I'll be quite honest with you, James. You had mentioned my work as a marriage and family therapist, and what I want to tell you is that that work is actually quite engaging, and it's the way I did it, at least at my job, was almost 50 hours a week
sure.
of being a counselor and notes and phone calls and, referrals that had to get made. So pretty readily, by the time you come and go, you leave at 9 o'clock in the morning, you get home at 7 o'clock at night, most nights. I'm just blessed that I was able to get, 4 productions, 4 productions of my short plays, and then the long play of Homecoming. That's like 5 or 6 productions I got off the ground in the last decade, while I worked 50 hours a week. And I wrote it, I produced it, and sometimes I acted in it. I haven't done a good job marketing myself. I haven't done a good job engaging in the New Play Exchange.
Sure.
I just didn't have a lot of extra headspace to maneuver a lot. At least I'm giving myself a pass in that regard, that I didn't do much of that.
No, sure, not at all. And this is, and by all means, please, that is not a criticism by any means. I'm just, it's, because again, obviously, when it comes to playwriting, this is for you. Mm-hmm. It's not really for anybody else. Right. Anything that comes out of it as far as, extra money, royalties, right, productions and stuff like that from people who want to produce your work. That's great. But right. I think there's something to be said about doing it for yourself and not worrying about whether or not you or maybe other people find you successful.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, James. You're absolutely right. I've done what I've done, and I've grown. I think I've grown. Largely, I've expanded my abilities as a writer largely in this last decade, as I was a full-time marriage and family therapist. And you're right that the work that I've done as a therapist, I want to bring you back to a question you asked not too long ago. But the work I do as a therapist does inform my writing. Sure. You can't read, especially in this second book of plays that'll be coming out shortly in the next couple of months. You're not going to be able to read many of these plays that I've written and not see a bit of therapeutic mindset at work. And I tend to write, and this is important too, I'm a big fan of trying to write more hopefully than some writers. I'm a big fan of trying to light up candles in the darkness, especially coming from this mindset of a therapist, trying to help people, trying to guide people. Now, the saddest thing in the world I could do as a playwright would be to be a therapist in my plays and speak like a therapist. No. Hopefully I'm a lot more subtle than that. But there is tends to be a hopeful thread that runs through most of my plays. Not everyone, but some are, 1 or 2 are just silly and not so hopeful. But most of them are dramatic, poignant, and they have a bit of hopefulness. And by the way, going back to that question of, does the work I do as a therapist inform my playwriting? Not too long ago, James, I believe I gave you an invite to a fundraiser I did for suicide awareness and prevention, where I wrote 4 different plays. 2 of the 4 were comedies and 2 were dramatic, but 4 plays that I wrote all about the theme of suicide, but from a hopeful perspective. Sure. And, I have to go on record that for now, at least, and maybe, I wanted to try to stay in that very hopeful vein. That's who I am as a person is, I don't want to curse the darkness. I want to light candles for people to light up the world and throw some light into the darkness that's so abundant around us. So I did want to throw that out to you. That was a good question you asked that I never got around to answering it
no worries at all.
Earlier.
So on that note as well then, because I think that there's also something to be said, I'm going to go back to how we got on this, and that's the doing it for yourself and we'll say creating your own opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I think that there's something to be said in that, to where you created your own success, for at least in your mind, where there's a lot of other playwrights that will write and then kind of wait for somebody else to give them permission, where it's like you're giving yourself permission to go ahead and put your work out there, which I think it says a lot.
Amen.
And I mean, we go back and forth, but I mean, and I think I know the obvious answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Do you recommend that? Do you recommend playwrights just say, you know what, I'm just going to produce it myself and get it out there?
Well, sure I would. To anybody, James, if you're going to sit around and wait to be discovered and wait for people to like your work enough to produce it, I don't know how many different playwriting festivals I've sent my work out to, especially, years ago when I was trying to win playwriting festivals or get produced, and nothing really came of it. Maybe twice. I got something done in Hollywood, and then I got something done in New York City. So I did. It happened twice, but man, I sent out a ton of plays, and nobody ever really got back to you. So to me, it's like almost winning the lottery, because they're going to produce 5 or 6 plays, and maybe they get 500. So your chances aren't great.
Sure.
And especially as a beginning playwright, as a burgeoning, an evolving playwright, I think you got to take the bull by the horns. And if you have the wherewithal, not everybody has the wherewithal to bring together a director, because I did it all as a producer, sure. Right? I attached directors. I auditioned the actors and chose it with my directors. And then I sit in on the rehearsals, and then I rent the theater space, and then I talk to people about the set design. So that's a lot of moving pieces. Not everybody has that ability to do that. And by the way, it also costs money.
No, 100%. And that's... Yeah.
And so, so there are a lot of people then that are not able to produce their work because it costs money.
Yes. And I will say that that's a sacrifice in itself in a way, because coming from a producing aspect, or producing perspective as well, that you don't always make your money back.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
But it's also about sacrifice and maybe giving up that one trip that year. Maybe you don't go on that vacation that you wanted to.
Right on.
But the great thing about producing, and hopefully you can make your money back, break even maybe, or at least get even. Yeah.
That's mostly what I've been able to do is break even.
Right.
Right.
Hey, look, it's great if you make a little bit of money, it's 100%. That's lovely. But at the same time, it's like, would you do it all over again the next year?
Of course. You get better. Again, the way I've done these productions, and not everybody, well, maybe some do and some don't. I don't know what other people do, but because I inject myself into the rehearsal process, and because I'm constantly sitting there with the director, watching the actors do their thing, and I'm kind of going through and I'm editing and trying to get that script as concise and sharp as I can. To me, every one of my plays, when they're produced, as I produce them, they got better. They got I would say almost 35% better than what it was when it was just on paper. So guess what? That makes me a better writer, and it makes me, more proud of the work that I'm presenting out there.
Right. Well, somebody, I think it was when we did Play Noir 2016, and somebody had asked, he's like, why do you do this? Mm-hmm. And I don't think at that time I didn't have an answer. I couldn't tell you. I really, honestly, I'm like, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm not necessarily making money at this. Mm-hmm. I could be hemorrhaging or losing money. It's 5 to 6 weeks worth of rehearsal, a week of tech, and then a 4-week run, and about $4,000 to $5,000 out of your pocket. And hopefully you break even.
Right. Correct.
And even if you don't, and that's when it clicked. It's like, why do you do this? And then there was that moment, I think it was our second weekend, and it was, just being backstage and being in that moment and saying, this is it. This is why, because you can't put a price on that experience. That experience is going to live with you,
Right on.
you know? And so, yeah, I can spend $5,000 on a vacation and that experience will live with me as well, but maybe it'll be a week. Maybe it'll be a 7-day cruise or a 7-day trip to Europe or whatever that may be, 10. But, you know, a 10, 12 week process in theater, you know, with those moments during tech, those moments backstage, those moments connecting with the audience, you can't. And I don't think that a lot of people think about those aspects, unfortunately, when it comes to theater.
Well, James, what I think you've just described there is the heart and soul of an artist, right? Sure. That wants to grow and that wants that experience and is willing to put in a lot of time and even money, a lot of money, to in a sense get yourself that experience, you know, to grow as an artist and to evolve and put yourself there. And I would want to tell you, James, think about it. Actors have to spend money and time on their acting classes, don't they? You know, if you want to make it as a stand-up comic, which, by the way, I have a little background in stand-up comedy way back when in New York growing up. But how many hours did I spend on a comedy stage in front of people? You know, a person that wants to grow has got to put in a lot of time and a lot of energy. So it's just a matter of where do you want to put it, you know?
Yeah.
But to me, I'm getting like better bang for my buck than most people because I'm growing as a writer, you know, as I've explained several times with the rehearsals. But then I put myself into a play, so I get to do a little acting, but also the producing experience, the overall experience, and getting my plays up and getting them sharper. You know, so I'm growing in a lot of different ways.
Sure, 100%.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, by the way, I'm not saying that every single production is going to cost you about $5,000. You can do stuff on a shoestring budget by any means. So, you know, don't let that comment scare you away. If you guys are really honestly considering producing your own work, you can find a way to do it. So, crowdfunding is a great way as well. Do some fundraisers and whatnot. That being said, because you were talking about time and whatnot, and I want to go back to what you were saying about being with Kaiser and doing 50-hour weeks.
Yeah.
So how do you discipline yourself to write, to sit down and still write when you have not just a full-time job, a 50-hour-a-week full-time job?
Yeah.
So where did you find the time? How did you force yourself to write? What were the habits that you kind of forced yourself to?
James, it's a good question, and I don't have a great answer for you on that, except I will tell you this. I spent many a weekend, you know, sitting down on my balcony with my laptop computer and putting in, you know, 5 and 6 hour days, you know, Saturday and Sunday, you know, and then sometimes I'm up early in the morning and I'll you know, before my wife gets up, I'll be up at 6 and I have till 8 and I don't leave for work till 9, and I'll be writing in the morning, early morning hours. But I'm going to be quite honest with you. I haven't done a lot of writing this last year or so. I actually just got to the point of a bit exhausted from all those years of good work with Kaiser. I just got tired. And this last show that I did, you know, you have to find, you know, an extra 20 or 30 hours in the couple of months leading up to this last show that we did called A Glimmer of Hope, the fundraiser for suicide awareness that we did in September. And, you know, that's exhausting when you. And when I say I do a 50-hour week, let me break that down for you. It's not 50 hours a week of working with patients, you know, head on. No, that's not it. But it's an hour of transportation. It's an hour of lunch. It's an hour or two of writing notes, making referrals, calling back patients that need to talk to you. So I'm not saying, that I'm doing 10 hours a day of meeting with patients. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that I'm leaving most days at 9 a.m, and most days I'm not coming back. Most nights I'm not coming back till 7. So to me, that's 9 to 12 is 3 and 7 is 10. So it's a 10-hour day that I'm not able to write. And so I just want to let you know that I'm not Superman, and I got tired.
Sure.
I haven't written much this last year,
At least you didn't tell me I write my plays while I'm talking to my clients. They don't think I'm taking notes and I'm actually writing a play.
Hey, by the way, I just want to make sure, because this is going to go out and people are going to hear it and they're going to know I'm a therapist. That, by the way, I'm finishing up at Kaiser the end of this month. I'm done. I'm retired.
Congrats.
So, yeah, thank you very much. It was a good 15-year run. But I do want everybody to know, please rest assured that I certainly did not take my patients' stories and turn them into plays. Maybe I get an idea here and there. But again, obviously,
Sure.
I'm not taking patient stories and putting it into plays. That's not happening.
Well, I think that what you have to take an oath or something like that.
Yeah, it's confidentiality.
There you
is
go.
what it's called.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'd like to think that people know better that was not the case. So
yeah, I mean, look, I'll give you an example. So maybe 10 years ago, an elderly, a couple came in, older folks, and they were talking about how they're having to struggle with the idea of raising their teen daughters, got pregnant at 15, and now they have to raise the child. All right. So to me, that's a great idea in my mind that from 10 years ago, and then maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I wrote a play called Picking Up the Pieces, where an elderly couple is meeting in a park outside of the DCFS building, Department of Children and Family Services, because the elderly mom wants to keep the child of the daughter who's gone to prison, while the father, the elderly father, is about to retire and wants to have a life finally. And so there's the conflict of the mother wants that baby. How dare you think that we're going to give up our daughter's baby? Let me take it home. I'll raise it. You go travel, do what you want to do. But that scene that I wrote called Picking Up the Pieces is a very realistic scene of two people that love each other but are at odds because one wants to keep a baby of their daughter that went to prison for drug charges. That's the least of the story. It's all about these two people. But so was that based upon, in the back of my head 10 years ago, a couple came in and said they're struggling with their teen pregnancy? Yeah. The kernel of the idea is there, but that's it. Then I have to create the story and the people.
Sure, 100%, absolutely. Let's talk about self-publishing. How much have you found success in that? Would you have gone another route? Are you happy with with going that pathway, or is there like I really just send my stuff out and hopefully somebody will pick it up? Or
James, let me tell you what I think about self-publishing. I'm not doing it to sell books. You know what I'm doing it? I don't want to just have 100 different manuscripts of all this paper at home with all these different drafts of all these different short plays that I've written. I want to throw out all those drafts, and my wife wants me to throw it out, by the way. I tend to hoard and save my drafts like they're precious gold, and she wants none of it. And what I want to do is throw the drafts, the paper, the hell out, and then I want to just have one book. I want to have a book. I want to leave a legacy of the work that I've done. And by the way, these two books, again, you held up the one book, Hearing Voices. And by the way, that's available on Amazon. You can pick it up on Amazon if you like.
We'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes down below.
Very good. And again, there's going to be a second one coming out, like we've talked about already, Hearing More Voices. So it'll be about 30 different plays, give or take, that I've written over my 15 years with Kaiser, but I mostly wrote the plays in the last 10 years, I would tell you. So to me, it's symbolic of the last 10 years of my life. I went back to playwriting because what brought me out here, 20 plus years ago was a screenwriting fellowship with Walt Disney Company. And I quickly found out after 3 or 4 years how empty screenwriting was for me, man. It's just so much rejection and so much just sitting alone and writing and rewriting, and then nobody is ever going to make you a movie because that's a 1 in a million. But the great thing about playwriting is you get to produce it and you get to give life to the characters.
Oh, it's accessible.
It's accessible. You can do it. You can produce it. I can't produce $1 million movie. Maybe somewhere down the road, maybe I can do a GoFundMe. I don't know. I don't care. But just Hollywood, chewed me up and spit me out after 2-3 years of trying to write and rewrite 120-page screenplays.
Sure. What is your least favorite thing about playwriting, if you have one?
Oh, I wish I was better. I wish I was better at telling bigger stories. They don't come easy to me, the bigger stories, which is why I only have 2 full-length plays under my belt, and I have 30 short plays. But you know what? This is where I learned to go with the flow and go with what comes easy to me. Screenwriting didn't come easy to me. 120-page stories that are mostly plot, action-oriented, plot-oriented, that's not my gift. My gift is putting a couple of people in a room together and letting them hash out their challenges and their conflicts. And to me, that gift just gets easier if it's a short piece and not an 80-page piece.
What do you think the difference is for you? Where do you find that conflict within yourself that you're struggling with a full length, but you have no problem with the shorter ones, that they just kind of...
Yeah, they come quick. Yeah. As I said to you before, it's like, I spit out a first draft. I spit it out in an hour or two. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the real work to make these short scripts beautiful and good is to rewrite them, 25 times and add twists and turns that you didn't have in the first. But I think in the longer plays, it involves more characters, right? So short plays usually is 2 or 3 characters for me. Long plays, I mean, there are plenty of good of plays that win the Pulitzer Prize. I'm thinking of Danny and the Deep Blue Sea, and then I'm thinking of also Kathy Bates was in a play with only her mother and herself, and she was suicidal.
Oh, that's Night Mother.
Night Mother, yeah. So there are 2-person plays that win the Pulitzer Prize. So it's not that they're not there, but it's funny. I've read Night Mother, and I read the dialogue in that, and it's like, that's really nothing I can craft really for myself. I don't know. I just find that I guess I'm going to just need to spend a little bit more time challenging myself to get a little bit more complicated stories and bring more characters into play. I've mostly just gone for the short stories, and one could say I'm a short story writer. I'm a short playwright at this point in time, and I'm going to try to evolve once I retire.
Sure. Are there elements that you struggle with in playwriting, whether it's short or long form, or as a character, conflict, plot? inciting incident, whatever you want to call it?
Well, that's a textbook question, James.
Sure it is. Of course it is.
I'm going to call you on that.
Sure, question. Absolutely. But you still have a process.
Yeah, but I think I've already revealed my process to you, which is, you know what? I take off on a kernel of an idea. Like, for example, I gave you that idea. Hey, I heard it on PBS. That guy that called in that wanted to die on the radio, talking to the talk show host, and that really captured me, right? Sure. So that captured me. I gave you that idea, the kernel of the idea of the older parents that have to raise a teenage daughter's baby. I gave you Total La Noche,
Sure.
and Blind Sight that my wife inspired in me. So I just need a kernel of an idea, and then I just need to sit down and put a couple of characters in place and run with it, James, and listen to the characters, hearing voices. By the way, that title got me. That title. When I try to look up that title, I think, and do a search on hearing voices, I mostly call up books on schizophrenia, just so you know. So I don't know that it's as brilliant a title as I thought it was. I was trying to do a play on, that the characters talk to me as a playwright. But meanwhile, hearing voices, there's a few books out there, hearing voices, that are all about schizophrenia. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I probably needed a better title that put me into the playwriting category. I don't know.
Maybe that you sold more copies with people thinking they were getting a schizophrenia book. No, so I ask about those questions about if there's elements that you struggle with, because I'm more interested in how you overcome that struggle than I am anything. If there's something, because again, some people do, and I think everybody's got their own strategy on how to overcome those things. And so if there's something that somebody can resonate with in that regard, if you do, if you don't, there's certain, I have issues with dialogue, not that I can't write dialogue. It's just that I don't think I can write clever dialogue.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I don't know how clever my dialogue is either, but I tell you what I do know. I have the ability to make people laugh and cry, and that's called poignant comedy. And that's what I know to do, is I know how to, I'm not a sitcom writer, right, where you get joke after joke.
Sure.
And by the way, I wasn't a great stand-up comic when I did it, some 25, 35 years ago. Wasn't a great stand-up because I don't tell jokes. But I know how to get real life people in a room talking to each other and making an audience laugh and then making them cry. I'm good at both of that. And James, as far as my process is concerned, I just have to have a decent kernel of an idea and then throw the characters into a room and let them talk and just try to listen to them. And by the way, if I have a process, it's always in the rewriting that my stories become much more interesting, where I get the twists and I get the turns. It's always in the rewriting. A lot of times I don't capture it in the early drafts.
Do the ideas just jump out when you sit down and you start rereading? Does it just kind of click? Oh, that doesn't work, or oh wait, this would be better, or are you just scratching things out? How are you approaching your rewriting?
Well, I have that first draft that I spit out in a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours.
Non-stop, I'm taking you just...
Yeah, pretty much. I don't like to try to rewrite a first draft. I just like to try to spit it out as best I can. And then, James, again, I'm sorry, I'm being repetitive here, but...
Oh, that's good.
I just keep looking at that first draft, and by the way, my wife is keen to this as well, because there are times when I'll read her an early draft, and she just looks at me and goes, Paul, that just isn't interesting. And I go, you watch and you wait and see what I do with this, because I see and I know that I can do better with these characters. But if you ask me, James, do I have any particular, tips to tell a writer on how to do that? I just always say, Writing is rewriting, and the more you sit with those characters, the more the characters will talk to you and kind of lead you, and the more you'll see openings for twists and turns that will make it more interesting. So I don't think that's very helpful. It's very generic what I just said there, but that's kind of my process. That's what it is.
So my guess is that you don't even outline. You just sit down, you get your premise, and you roll.
So let me say this. I think the time is going to come with where the bigger scripts, I think, are going to call for an outline.
Sure. Okay.
And maybe that's why I don't write those 80-page scripts yet, is because I don't want to bother with an outline. And I haven't done that a lot. And I didn't even do it with Homecoming, and I didn't do it with Merry Christmas, Miss Molly, which became NYC Nativity, which is actually quite a catchy story.
When is this new one due out? When do you plan on?
The new book, you mean?
Yes.
So all the plays are written.
Okay.
And I'm doing something different with this book than I did with the last one. The last one, I tried to be a little psychology friendly, therapy friendly. So I put it into 4 categories. Last one, it was family, it was friendship, it was love, and it was redemption. Those were the 4 categories, and I had 3 or 4 plays for each category. And I did just a 2-page blurb from my psychology mind, my therapist mind, explaining what I thought about friendship, what I thought about love, what I thought about redemption. And I thought they were pretty good 2 pages before the plays began. That was the first book that you've held up today. This next book, though, I'm going about it a little differently. So I got it in 4 categories. I think you're going to like the 4 categories, my friend. One category, now that I'm finished with Kaiser Permanente and retired as at the end of this month, one category will be on therapy, and I'll have 3 plays. 2 of the 3 are comedies, 1 drama. So I'll have 3 therapy plays. I have 4 plays about suicide. The ones, in fact, they're the same ones that went on in the fundraiser, A Glimmer of Hope, that we just did. So suicide, therapy, I believe love is back on the agenda. I can't get away from love. And I think I have family as well as a 4th category. But now, instead of doing like a 2-page blurb in front of the plays as the first book, what I'm going to do is, after each and every play, I'm going to just write a quick page on what inspired the piece for me, and some little ideas, little sprinkles of my therapy brain that sees and kind of went into that play. But little blurbs on, like, see if you see this part of the play was inspired by this part of my therapy brain. So again, it'll still give you a little therapy piece. And by the way, I love that I've done 2 books, 30 short plays that in essence captured my 2 worlds, my world as a therapist, my world as a writer. I love that I did that, and that I'm leaving a legacy behind in these 2 books that I've put out in 15 years at Kaiser. And again, I've only been writing the plays, went back to playwriting just the last, I'd say 8 or 9 years, 10, maybe 10 years.
And you'll get back into it soon again.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll have more time to get back into it. I'm also going to try to do a little bit more auditioning as an actor and have a little fun that way too.
Nice.
That's what I'm thinking.
Couple more questions before we wrap this up. You said you write comedy, you can make people cry. You make people laugh and make people cry. How do you do that?
Oh, James, come on. You've been around this storytelling business long enough, James. James, I would tell you it's a gift. I would want to tell you that.
You don't think it can be taught?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a great question that you're asking because, James, in my other life, I also have a teaching background, right? I was 5 years a teacher in the LAUSD. And it's pretty hard to keep the attention of a middle schooler and a high schooler. So,
and some adults too.
Yes, and some adults as well. So you got to use humor. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, as the saying goes, right? So you keep them on their toes by saying things unexpected. Get a laugh. They weren't expecting their teacher to say this or do this, and but then they're much more open to hearing from you, and I feel the same way about the stories I tell. Man, I don't want to just write a straight drama, even though I've written straight dramas. I do straight dramas. I'll give you 4 plays in there that are straight dramas, but even my straight dramas have a couple of good lines in there that are going to make you laugh, and I think that's just good writing. Is keeping people on their toes. It is like, okay, if you don't get so intense with me for too long, because then you're gonna lose me. So you know what? I gotta break it up with a little bit of laughter. So I know what I'm doing, but if you ask me, am I studied in how to do that? Or, this is getting back to me being a teacher, could I teach somebody how to do that, James?
Right.
I don't know, James. I think people get gifts. I think some playwrights, it comes pretty natural to them. That man, the guy that influenced me a lot was Brighton Beach Memoirs. What's his name?
Neil Simon.
Neil Simon. Oh man, I read his early stuff. I loved it, but I loved his later stuff so much more because it made you laugh, made you cry. So I know they influenced me, and maybe the reason why it resonated so much for me was that I felt I could do it. Okay. It's interesting. I really like David Mamet too, but I don't curse as well as he does. and I don't live in those world of those characters that he comes up with from the street. Even though I'd love to write a David Mamet type play, but it's not in the fabric of who I am, even though I'll probably try to write one sooner or later.
Are you, obviously, normally I would ask, what are you working on now? And we know that for the most part is this book. Are there other ideas that you have? Are there other plays you're going to sit down and write that you're thinking about? Or on that note, are there other plays that you might not have finished that you're going to dust off and revisit?
Okay, so I had this question asked of me one time before with Stephanie Story, a novelist friend of mine, a best-selling novelist friend of mine, Stephanie Story, and she asked me a similar question. And I have to skate around this a little bit because I'm very protective of this great idea I have from history, but it involves some theatrical giants from the past. That were in very great conflict with one another, and had a very great friendship at one time with one another, and that's all I can say.
Is that a full length, or is that going to be a?
Oh, that's got to be a full length. That I want to be a full length.
Good to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you on the socials? Where can people find your work? How can they connect with you? Do you have a website? Mm-hmm. All that goodness.
Yes, James. Thank you for asking that question. Yes. So as we said already, they can grab my book, Hearing Voices, 15 Short Plays by a Psychologist, by a therapist, right? Is that my title?
Yes, by a psychotherapist.
By a psychotherapist. I hope there's not too much.
Not to be confused with a psychotherapist.
Yes, exactly. Not too much space between the two of them, right? So you can get that on Amazon, and hopefully I'll have the second one on Amazon in the next 3 to 6 months, I'd say. Probably 6 months. But I also have they can look me up, Paul Surace, which is the Italian pronunciation of my name, which is spelled Surace. They can go onto YouTube and they can see some plays that I've videotaped. In fact, I have a ton of plays that are on my YouTube channel that have been videotaped. So just my name, Playwright, and videos, and you'll find some of my work on YouTube for sure. I do have a website also called Candlelight Plays. I think it's candlelightplays.com. And again, the candlelight comes from the idea of what we said earlier. I'm a guy that would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. So Candlelight Plays is a website that I've created with a friend. I think that's about it, though, right? But you can find me on Amazon. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on my website, candlelightplays.com. But I don't frequent it much. I put that website up about 3-4 years ago, and I haven't done much with it. So I'm not, like I said, James, I've been working hard, and I haven't been able to stretch myself any much further than what I've done. So,
it's almost over. There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And I'm not technically savvy either, so that would be something that would take more time to kind of get it up to speed.
So are you on the socials as well? Are you on the Instagram or the Twitter or the Facebook?
Facebook only. Facebook.
All
yes. Right. Actually, people could probably reach out to me very easily on Facebook. Paul Surace, Surace.
Wonderful. Yeah. Paul, thanks for coming on to the Playwright Spotlight.
James, thank you so very much. And I, as I've told you already, I really have a great respect and appreciation for your creativity, for your talent, and for your ambition, that you keep pushing. Whether it's your producing things that you've done, and now you got a podcast. So I look at you and I say, I've got a lot to learn from that man right there. So.
God bless you. I appreciate it. Yep. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Tell us about what your favorite part of this episode was, and be sure to share this episode with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.